Summary and analysis of The Casual Vacancy by JK Rowling. What happens when one man's death tears open the dirty secrets of an entire town? Not a king, not a billionaire, just a middle-aged councillor in a sleepy English village. He collapses in a car park, gone in an instant. But the ripple effect is vicious. Families unravel, friendships crack, class divides harden, and by the end, 2 children are dead. This is The Casual Vacancy by JK Rowling, her first book after Harry Potter, and it shocked readers. No spells, no wands, no golden trio. Instead, Rowling drags us into a town that looks perfect on the outside but is rotting inside. A town split between the picture postcard Pagford and the grim council estate called The Fields. A vacancy opens on the local council, and suddenly everyone's mask slips. What follows is a war, political, personal, and devastating. The Casual Vacancy Summary. When Barry Fairbrother drops dead in a car park, the small English town of Pagford is left shaken. Not just because a man has died, but because Barry, a local councillor, was one of those rare people who stirred things up. He cared about fairness. He spoke for the people in the fields, a run-down council estate that most of Pagford would rather erase. His death creates what Rowling calls the casual vacancy on the parish council. It is a literal empty seat, but also a metaphor for all the gaps in people's lives. The novel unfolds not through a single hero, but through a crowded stage of voices. Each one flawed, sometimes cruel, sometimes tender. Rowling, breaking from Harry Potter's magic, brings her gaze down to the grit of a small town politics, gossip, and class divides. The story is messy, sprawling, and unapologetically human. The Battle for Pagford. Pagford is an old English town, postcard pretty, with cobbled streets, historic abbey walls, and a middle-class population that takes pride in its orderliness. For them, tradition and appearance matter. They like their town polished, self-contained, and free from what they call outsiders' problems. Just a short distance away lies the Fields, a council estate. It is rougher, poorer, with concrete blocks, broken lifts, graffiti, and families living on the edge. Drug use is common, teen pregnancies are common. Many Pagford residents think of it as an eyesore that was mistakenly joined in their parish. They would rather push it off to nearby Yarville, leaving its problems behind. The rivalry grows out of this divide. Should Pagford accept the Fields as part of its responsibility or cut ties? Barry Fairbrother had fought to support the Fields, believing the town should invest in them and keep the Bellchapel addiction clinic open. Howard Mollison and his allies, however, want Pagford rid of the Fields entirely. They argue that the estate is dragging the town down. This is the fight the casual vacancy sets in motion. A battle not just for a council seat, but for the soul of the town. Inclusion versus exclusion, compassion versus convenience. Behind the walls of homes. If the council chambers are where the battles are fought in daylight, the real blood is drawn behind closed doors. Rowling takes us into the kitchens, bedrooms, and bathrooms, letting us see what people hide. Parminder Javanda, a Sikh general practitioner, respected but quietly exhausted, struggles with her daughter Sukhvinder, who self-harms and feels invisible. Parminder herself supports Barry's view that the Fields deserve compassion. The Mollison household is a nest of vanity and dysfunction. Shirley Mollison, Howard's wife, feeds her husband's ego and sees with malice. Their son Miles, running for council, is spineless, while his wife Samantha drowns in boredom and sexual frustration. Gavin Hughes, Barry's friend, is a lawyer stuck in a passionless relationship with Kay Borden, a social worker new to Pagford. Kay works with families in the Fields, and her very presence annoys locals who would prefer to ignore those struggles. Colin Wall, nicknamed Cubby, is a deputy headmaster, riddled with anxiety and shame about his own mental health, his marriage held together by threads. The town's respectable surface masks rot, and beneath it all is the constant reminder, the existence of the Fields and how everyone chooses either to help or to deny them. Terry Weedon, the dependence and collapse. Among the Fields residents, Terry Weedon stands out as the embodiment of generational collapse. She had a miserable childhood, but as an adult, she has turned into a complete mental and physical wreck, ravaged by heroin, incapable of caring for her children, drifting between short stints of rehabilitation and long stretches of relapse. She survives entirely on government support. Housing, food assistance, social workers all prop her up, and yet she often acts entitled as if the world owes her. Responsibility slips through her fingers. The community sees her as proof that the Fields are a waste of taxpayer money. But Rowling forces us to look closer. Terry is both victim and perpetrator, a product of neglect who in turn neglects. It is through Terry's failures that her daughter Krystal is forced to grow up too quickly. Krystal Weedon. Krystal, Terry's teenage daughter, embodies both the fight and the failure of the fields. She is tough, foul-mouthed, and quick to lash out, but also fiercely protective of her little brother Robbie. She cooks, cleans, and shields him when Terry cannot, or rather does not. Barry Fairbrother was Krystal's one supporter. He coached her in rowing, gave her discipline, and showed her she had worth. After his death, that fragile sense of support collapses. For Pagford, Krystal is a nuisance, a symbol of everything wrong with the fields. For Rowling, she is the bruised heart of the novel, a reminder of what happens when a society shrugs and says, "Not our problem." Teenagers, rebellion, and the internet. The teenagers of Pagford, whether from the historic streets or the fields, become truth tellers and saboteurs. Andrew Price, son of an abusive father, longs to escape both home and suffocation of Pagford respectability. Fats Wall, Colin's adoptive son, worships authenticity and mocks hypocrisy. His cruelty hides behind his philosophy. He humiliates Sukhvinder and toys with Krystal, thinking it's all part of his search for the real. Sukhvinder, cut down by bullying, finds moments of strength only when she dares to stand up, both to Fats and to her own despair. Together the teenagers weaponize the internet. A ghost of Barry Fairbrother starts posting on the council website, exposing secrets and hypocrisies. It is petty, childish, and yet devastating, and it blurs the divide. Pagford's polished citizens are dragged into the same mud they accuse the fields of wallowing in. Unraveling lives. As the election looms, Pagford's respectable surface disintegrates, secrets burst. Colin Wall's crippling anxiety and obsessive guilt come to light. Kay realizes Gavin never wanted her and resents her work with the fields. Samantha contemplates affairs, trapped in a marriage she doesn't value. Howard, the town patriarch, collapses from a heart attack at his delicatessen, his power shaken. All the while, the rivalry over the fields festers. Should Pagford keep Bellchapel Clinic alive, or shut it and push its clients elsewhere? What looks like policy on paper turns into personal destruction in living rooms and bedrooms. Tragedy of Krystal. The climax is brutal and rooted in the fields. Krystal, desperate to secure stability for Robbie, decides that having a baby might force social services to keep them together. In her mind, pregnancy would prove he is an adult capable of looking after her brother. She lures Fats Wall into sleeping with her, thinking this might change her family's fate. But everything collapses. While Krystal is briefly distracted, Robbie slips away and drowns in a river. Overcome with grief and guilt, Krystal takes her own life with heroin. The tragedy is not just hers, it is Pagford's. The town spent years arguing whether the fields were theirs to care for. In the meantime, a teenage girl and her little brother paid the ultimate price. Again, the fault doesn't just entirely lie on Pagford. Their own mother practically abandons them, an important aspect that Rowling doesn't delve much on in the hurry to complete the novel. She seems to dump the entire responsibility of the lives of both the children on the residents of Pagford. After the storm. By the end, the election results barely matter. The so-called leaders stand exposed as petty, selfish, shallow. Barry Fairbrother, though dead, lingers as the ghost of what compassion could have looked like. The Javandas mourn Krystal, Parminder crushed by the knowledge that she had once dismissed the girl. Colin Wall unravels further, Fats is shaken by his role in Krystal's death, and Sukhvinder, once silenced, steps into a quiet resilience. Pagford remains, but changed. Not purified, not healed, just marked by loss. The fields are still there, the rivalry is unresolved, Terry still exists in and out of treatment, clinging to state support. The cycle continues. Would you call the Casual Vacancy a tragedy? Yes, the Casual Vacancy is very much a tragedy, though not in the Shakespearean sense of a single hero's downfall. It's a modern social tragedy. Here is why. The structure is tragic. The story begins with sudden death, Barry Fairbrother, and ends with more death, this time of the most vulnerable, Krystal and Robbie. Everything in between is a slow unmasking of hypocrisy, cruelty, and neglect. Instead of characters rising to the occasion, they fail. Instead of redemption, we get collapse. That's the architecture of tragedy. The characters are trapped. Tragedy often comes from characters being unable to escape their flaws or their circumstances. In Pagford, that's exactly what happens. Terry cannot overcome addiction, Colin cannot beat his paranoia, Samantha cannot break out of her boredom, the fields cannot escape poverty because the town won't let them. Krystal, the one who tries to fight, is destroyed by forces bigger than her. The theme of wasted potential. Barry Fairbrother represented hope, the idea that compassion and responsibility could change lives. His death creates the casual vacancy, but symbolically it creates a vacuum of morality. Nobody fills in. The wasted potential is the bitter core of the tragedy. The emotional effect. A tragedy leaves you with grief, anger, and the sense that what happens was preventable. That's exactly how readers feel about Krystal and Robbie. Their deaths aren't fate, like in Greek drama, they are the outcome of a society that looked away, which makes them even harder to stomach. So yes, the casual vacancy is a tragedy, not because of grand heroes or dramatic battles, but because of the small, everyday failures of ordinary people. Rowling makes you feel the weight of those failures long after you close the book. The main characters in The Casual Vacancy. Barry Fairbrother. Barry is the catalyst of the novel. A parish councillor who dies suddenly at the start, he is the one character who truly cared about the fields and the people living there. He came from the modest roots himself and carried an instinct for fairness. His death creates the casual vacancy, but more importantly, it removes the one moral anchor in Pagford, leaving the town exposed to its own pettiness and selfishness. Howard Mollison. Howard is the self-satisfied king of Pagford. Obese, smug, and politically ruthless, he leads the camp that wants the fields cut off from the town. He hides his cruelty behind respectability, running a delicatessen and pretending to be a man of tradition. But beneath that exterior is a hunger for control and status. His health eventually betrays him, but not before his influence poisons much of the council fight. Shirley Mollison. Shirley, Howard's wife, is every bit as conniving as her husband, though in quieter ways. She is the keeper of grudges, feeding Howard's vanity and whispering poison about his rivals. Her identity is tied to her husband's standing in the town, and she works behind the scenes to destroy anyone who threatens their dominance, especially those who sided with Barry. Miles Mollison. Miles, Howard and Shirley's son, is running for the council seat after Barry's death. He is weak-willed, eager to please his parents, and more concerned with appearances than principles. His lack of backbone makes him a useful pawn in Howard's plans, but it also makes him one of the least respected characters in the story. Samantha Mollison. Samantha, Miles' wife, is restless and bitter. Bored by her marriage and suffocated by small town life, she slips into fantasies of escape and attraction to younger men. Her frustrations give us a glimpse of how emptiness can eat away at the supposedly comfortable middle-class households in Pagford. Colin Cubby-Wall. Colin is deputy headmaster and a councillor. He is plagued by crippling anxiety and obsessive guilt about his past, which makes him erratic and unstable. He means well but cannot hold himself together. His fragile mental health affects not only his own life but also his family, particularly his adoptive son Fats. Tessa Walls. Tessa, Colin's wife, works at the school and is often the glue that holds her crumbling family together. She endures Colin's breakdowns and Fats' cruelty with weary resignation, embodying the quiet suffering of someone who is too tired to fight but too loyal to walk away. Stuart Fats Wall. Fats, Colin and Tessa's adoptive son, is one of the novel's most unsettling teenagers. Obsessed with authenticity, he believes in being brutally honest, no matter who gets hurt. This philosophy becomes an excuse for cruelty, especially towards Sukhvinder Javanda, whom he bullies mercilessly. His reckless pursuit of the real leads him into a destructive relationship with Krystal Weedon. Gavin Hughes. Gavin is a lawyer and Barry's old friend, but he is weak and indecisive. He is romantically entangled with Kay Borden, a social worker, though he doesn't truly love her. Gavin spends most of the novel avoiding responsibility, both in his relationships and his role within the town. Kay Borden. Kay moves to Pagford to be with Gavin, but quickly realizes he is not committed. A social worker, she becomes deeply involved with the Weedons, especially Terry and Krystal. Kay represents the state's attempt to prop up families like the Weedons, but her frustration shows how overwhelming and thankless the work often is. Parminder Javanda. Parminder is a respected doctor, a Sikh woman raising her family in Pagford. She is intelligent and professional, but burdened by her struggles with her daughter Sukhvinder. Parminder supports Barry's cause, believing the fields should not be abandoned, and becomes one of the few moral voices left after his death. Sukhvinder Javanda. Sukhvinder is Parminder's teenage daughter, shy and self-conscious, bullied at school by Fats and others. She struggles with self-harm and a lack of confidence, but shows quiet strength later in the novel, especially in the face of tragedy. She is one of the few characters who finds a sliver of growth by the end. Krystal Weedon. Krystal is the most tragic figure in the novel. A teenager from the fields, she is foul-mouthed, combative, and dismissed by most of Pagford as hopeless. Yet beneath the roughness is a girl trying to protect her little brother, Robbie, and carve out a better life. Barry was her mentor, and after his death, she spirals, making desperate choices. Her story ends in disaster, a brutal reminder of what neglect and indifference cost. Terry Weedon. Terry, Krystal's mother, is a heroin addict and a wreck of a person. She survives only because of government support, unable to function without it. She has lived a life of abuse and neglect, but as an adult she continues the cycle, offering nothing to her children except instability and pain. She embodies the town's argument about welfare dependency, though Rowling also shows the misery behind it. Robbie Weedon. Robbie is Krystal's younger brother, an innocent child caught in the chaos of neglect. Krystal tries to shield him from their mother's failures, but in the end, his drowning seals the novel's tragic arc. His death is the most painful proof that the town's indifference has consequences. Important questions about the casual vacancy. What does the title The Casual Vacancy mean? Literally, it's the empty seat left on the parish council after Barry Fairbrother's death. But Rowling uses it as a metaphor for every kind of emptiness in human life. The absence of empathy, purpose, and moral strength. There are vacancies everywhere, in homes, in families, in hearts. The title reminds us that it takes only one loss, one gap, to make an entire system collapse. What message does Rowling want to send about welfare and responsibility? She wants to show both sides, compassion and abuse. Helping the helpless is what makes a society human. But when people start expecting help as a right, without effort or change, compassion begins to rot. Terry Weedon is the best example. A woman broken by her past, but unwilling to rise from it. Rowling's message is blunt. Empathy must be paired with discipline, or it turns poisonous. Why does the book feel so depressing? Because it's honest. Rowling removes every illusion of comfort. There is no hero to save the day, no miracle at the end. The sadness comes from recognition, from realizing that this is how people actually live. The small cruelties, the quiet hypocrisies, the wasted chances. It's depressing because it tells the truth we spend our lives avoiding. When does compassion stop being noble and start becoming self-destructive? Compassion loses its meaning when it becomes blind. Helping someone who refuses to help themselves turns into emotional decay. Rowling shows this through social workers like Kay and townspeople like Barry. Their goodwill is noble, but it often feeds a cycle that never ends. Compassion must come with accountability, otherwise it breeds entitlement instead of change. Why you would like to read The Casual Vacancy? You should read The Casual Vacancy because it rips apart the illusion of a perfect little town. JK Rowling takes this peaceful English parish and turns it into a battlefield of class, morality and hypocrisy. Every character feels painfully real. There is the smug neighbor, the gossiping wife, the restless teenager, the addict who's lost control. Nobody is purely good or purely evil. And that's what keeps you watching. You see bits of yourself in these people, your flaws, your justifications, your quiet fears. It's not just a story about Pagford. It's a story about every community that looks perfect from the outside but is quietly falling apart inside. Personally, I have always believed that a balanced, responsible part of society should take care of the destructive one. That's what humanity should look like. But here's the hard truth. We don't live in an ideal world. The destructive side often carries a dangerous sense of entitlement. It expects to be taken care of, no matter how little it gives back. It drags down the very people trying to help. Rowling captures that perfectly through Pagford and the fields. You can feel compassion running thin, you can see empathy turning into quiet anger, and that's the genius of this book. It doesn't hand you easy answers. It just shows you what happens when kindness meets dependency, and when moral duty turns into exhaustion. Why you wouldn't like to read The Casual Vacancy? The Casual Vacancy isn't for everyone. It's heavy, it's dark, and it doesn't offer any comfort. There are no heroes to root for, no happy endings waiting at the last page. Almost every family in Pagford is broken in some way. Addiction, abuse, loneliness, and moral decay. If you're looking for warmth and redemption, you won't find much here. Rowling doesn't give you closure. She gives you discomfort. The story drags you through other people's misery, and sometimes it's hard to breathe in that world. You might also feel that Rowling, in her attempt to humanize suffering, ends up making excuses for people who are reckless. The ones who don't care for themselves, who don't care for their children, and yet expect society to carry both of them. She gives them backstories, yes, but very little accountability. That's what bothers some readers, the sense that irresponsibility gets explained away rather than controlled. And then there is the pace. The first 100 pages move slowly, full of gossip and local politics that feel too real, almost dull. But that's the point. The book's realism is relentless. It doesn't let you escape into fantasy. It makes you stare at dependency, at cruelty, and at how compassion can start to rot when it's constantly abused. I hope you have enjoyed the summary and analysis of the Casual Vacancy. If yes, please like the video or subscribe to my channel so that you get notified when I upload my next video.